Juneteenth is a very important day in American history. It is celebrated on June 19th each year. This day marks a crucial moment. It remembers when the last enslaved African Americans learned they were free. This news came to them in Texas, more than 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. For many, Juneteenth is also known as Freedom Day. Some also call it Emancipation Day or Jubilee Day. It represents the moment when freedom finally reached the last enslaved people in Texas. President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863. The proclamation declared that all enslaved people in Confederate states were free. However, this did not immediately free all enslaved individuals. The Civil War was still being fought. Many slave owners in the Confederacy ignored the proclamation. They did not want to lose their forced labor, so for many enslaved people, freedom was still just a promise. It was not yet a reality they could live. Texas was a very remote state during the Civil War. It was far from most of the fighting. Because of this, many slave owners from other southern states moved to Texas. They brought thousands of enslaved people with them. They hoped to continue the system of slavery there. They believed they could escape the reach of the Union Army. This meant that slavery continued in Texas with little change. News of freedom and the end of the war traveled very slowly to this distant part of the country. The Civil War officially ended in April 1865. General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Ulysses S. Grant, marking the defeat of the Confederacy. However, life for the enslaved people in Texas did not change immediately. They were still held in bondage. They did not know that the war was over. They did not know that they were legally free. Their freedom had been declared years earlier, but the message had not reached them, nor had the power to enforce it. This painful delay is a key part of the Juneteenth story. On June 19, 1865, Union Army General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas. He was not alone. He brought with him about 2,000 federal troops. Their presence was very important. It signaled that the Union now had control over Texas. Their mission was to enforce the laws of the United States, including the Emancipation Proclamation. The arrival of these soldiers meant that change was finally coming. The news they carried would transform the lives of over 250,000 enslaved people in the state. On that day, General Granger stood and read General Order No. 3. This order was clear and direct. It stated, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." The order also stated that the connection between former masters and slaves would now be as employer and hired labor. This was the official announcement that freedom had finally come. It was a powerful moment, delivering news that was long overdue. The news of freedom brought immediate and strong reactions. Enslaved people were overjoyed. Many sang, danced, and prayed in the streets. Some were in shock and disbelief. They had waited so long for this day. The idea of being truly free was overwhelming for many. It was a moment of profound relief and celebration. For the first time, they could imagine a future where they were not property. They could think about making their own choices and living their own lives. This first celebration of emancipation in Texas became known as Jubilee Day. The word Jubilee often refers to a time of great joy and liberation. It was a fitting name for this historic occasion. Jubilee Day marked the moment when freedom was finally enforced for many still enslaved in Texas. It was a day of new beginnings. Families hoped to reunite. Individuals could dream of education and self-determination. This day symbolized the start of a long and difficult journey toward full equality and justice. The tradition of celebrating Juneteenth began almost immediately. In the years following 1865, newly freed African Americans in Texas organized annual celebrations on June 19th. These early Juneteenth gatherings often centered around prayer meetings and religious services. People would also share meals, with barbecue being a common feature. There were songs, dances, and games. Storytelling was also very important, as elders shared their experiences of slavery and their joy at gaining freedom. These celebrations were vital community events. Despite its importance, Juneteenth faced many challenges. For many decades, it was largely ignored outside of black communities. During the Jim Crow era, which enforced racial segregation and discrimination, celebrating black history and freedom could be dangerous. Public displays of black pride were often suppressed. Mainstream American history narratives focused on the Emancipation Proclamation as the end of slavery. This often overlooked the delayed freedom experienced in Texas. Juneteenth was not widely taught in schools or acknowledged by the broader public. As a result, Juneteenth was effectively erased from many history textbooks. The story of the end of slavery was often simplified. It did not include the crucial events of June 19, 1865 in Galveston. This meant that generations of Americans grew up without knowing about Juneteenth. They did not understand its significance. This omission created an incomplete understanding of American history. It failed to acknowledge the full journey to emancipation for all African Americans. The resilience of the Black community was key in keeping this memory alive. Despite these obstacles, Black communities, especially in Texas, diligently preserved the Juneteenth tradition. They passed down the stories and customs from generation to generation. Churches, families, and local community groups organized celebrations each year. They bought land specifically for Juneteenth festivities, sometimes called emancipation grounds. These efforts ensured that the memory of June 19th would not be lost. This grassroots perseverance was crucial. It kept the spirit of Juneteenth alive until it could gain wider recognition. The journey of Juneteenth from a regional observance to national recognition was long and gradual. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s played a significant role. This movement brought increased attention to African American history and experiences. As Black history began to be studied more widely, Juneteenth started to gain more awareness beyond Texas. Activists and community leaders worked tirelessly for decades. They wanted Juneteenth to be acknowledged as an important date for all Americans. Their efforts slowly began to bear fruit. A major milestone occurred in 1980. Texas became the first state to officially recognize Juneteenth as a state holiday. This was largely due to the efforts of African American legislators like Al Edwards. This official recognition was a significant step forward. It gave Juneteenth a new level of legitimacy. Following Texas's lead, other states began to acknowledge Juneteenth as a state holiday or a day of observance. The awareness of Juneteenth continued to grow steadily. It became a symbol of African American freedom and achievement. The events of 2020, particularly the widespread social justice protests, brought renewed focus to issues of racial inequality and American history. This created a powerful momentum for the national recognition of Juneteenth. Many people, organizations, and political leaders called for Juneteenth to become a federal holiday. In June 2021, Congress passed a bill to establish Juneteenth National Independence Day. President Joe Biden signed it into law on June 17, 2021. This was a truly historic moment for the nation. The recognition of Juneteenth as a federal holiday is profoundly important. It acknowledges a critical part of American history that was overlooked for too long. Juneteenth reminds us that the fight for freedom and justice has been a long and arduous journey. It is a day for celebration, but also for reflection and education. It encourages all Americans to learn about the complexities of their nation's past. Juneteenth is not just Black history, it is American history. It is an essential part of our collective memory.